The wind howled over the dry Texas plains as the sun sank low, spilling golden fire across miles of empty land. Dust curled around a creaking wagon where a thin girl sat, her hands clutching a worn satchel that held all she owned, a torn shawl, a wooden comb, and a folded letter that had promised her a new life. Her name was Clara May Hensley, 22 and already used to the taste of heartbreak. Her family had once been proud farmers until drought and debt turned them cruel. When the doctor declared Clara barren after a fever took her strength years ago, her parents' eyes had dimmed with disappointment. A woman who can't bear children is no use to a husband, her mother had whispered. So when a letter came from a widowed rancher looking for companionship, her father had struck a bargain, $20 and a promise that Clara would never return. As the wagon bumped toward the distant ranch, Clara pressed the letter to her chest, wondering what kind of man would buy a woman like cattle. The ranch appeared at dusk, a lonely sprawl of weather-beaten wooden fences stretching toward a horizon of gold. A tall figure stood near the corral, his broad shoulders backlit by the dying light. He wore a hat pulled low and boots caked in dust, but even from the wagon, Clara saw the quiet sorrow in his posture. This was John Rourke, a widowed rancher whose wife and son had died 3 winters ago in a house fire that left him broken, living only for the land and the rhythm of work. When he saw the wagon stop, he didn't move immediately. He'd expected a stout, middle-aged woman seeking comfort, not the frail girl who stepped down with trembling hands and eyes too big for her face. "Mr. Rourke?" she asked softly, her voice barely carried by the wind. He nodded once. "You can call me John. You must be Miss Hensley." She hesitated, clutching the strap of her satchel. "Yes, sir, Clara." He motioned toward the porch. "Come inside. You look half-starved." Inside, the cabin smelled of smoke and leather. The furniture was plain but clean, everything in its place. Clara perched on the edge of a chair while John poured her coffee. "I'm not much for words," he said finally. "I don't expect you to work miracles here. Just keep the house company." Clara's eyes lifted. "You mean, I'm not here to be your wife?" He looked startled, then weary. "No, Mom. My wife's buried up on the ridge, and I aim to leave it that way. I just need someone who can make the place feel less empty." Clara's throat tightened. No man had ever spoken with such gentle finality. That night, she slept in the small room off the kitchen, listening to coyotes cry in the dark. She dreamt of hands reaching through fire and a man's voice saying, "I don't need children, I need peace." In the morning, she rose before dawn, baking bread and mending torn curtains. When John came in, surprised by the smell of breakfast, she looked up shyly. "I hope I didn't overstep," she said. He shook his head, the corner of his mouth twitching. "It's been a long time since this house smelled like home." Days turned into weeks. Clara learned the rhythm of ranch life, the creak of the barn door at sunrise, the soft lowing of cattle, the quiet satisfaction in John's eyes when a job was done right. She found herself laughing again, though she tried to hide it. He was stern but fair, with a dry humor that surfaced when she least expected it. Once, when she slipped while carrying a pail of water, he caught her by the elbow, his touch steady and warm. "Careful, Clara. This land's got teeth," he said with a half-smile that sent her heart stumbling. At night, they sometimes sat by the fire in silence. She would sew while he whittled wood, both pretending the quiet between them wasn't filled with unspoken longing. One stormy evening, thunder rolled across the plains, and lightning cracked so close the windows rattled. Clara gasped as rain hammered the roof. John moved to the window, staring out at the fury of nature. "Lost my boy to a night like this," he murmured, his voice thick. Without thinking, Clara placed a hand on his arm. He stiffened, then slowly relaxed, his gaze drifting to her face. "You've got kindness in you," he said quietly. "Don't lose it." The next morning, he found her tending a wounded foal near the barn. Her skirt was muddied, her hair damp, but her hands were gentle as she whispered to the frightened animal. Something inside him broke then. The wall he'd built after the fire. Watching her, he realized that the house wasn't empty anymore, and neither was he. Word spread fast in the nearby town. Folks whispered that John Rourke had taken in a barren girl, that she cooked for him, laughed with him, maybe even shared his bed. One afternoon, Clara overheard two women at the general store snickering. "He'll send her off soon enough," one said. "A man like Rourke needs heirs, not a broken thing." The words burned deep. That night, Clara packed her satchel, tears blurring her vision. When John returned from the fields, he found her by the wagon, shaking. "Where you going?" he demanded. "Back," she whispered. "Your neighbors are right. You need someone who can give you more than I can." His expression hardened, then softened as he stepped closer. "You think I brought you here to fill a cradle?" he asked. "Clara, I've had a son. I've had a wife. I don't need children. I need you." The rain began to fall again, soft and steady, soaking her hair as she stared at him, speechless. "But why?" she whispered. He reached up, brushing a strand of wet hair from her cheek. "Because you brought life back to this place. To me. You laugh at the wind. You talk to the horses. You made me remember what it's like to feel something other than grief." She broke then, sobbing as he pulled her into his arms. For the first time in years, John Rourke held someone not out of duty or pity but out of love. They stood in the rain until the sky cleared and the stars came out like silver promises. From that night, they were no longer strangers but two wounded souls learning to heal together. Clara no longer cared what the world thought. She had been sold as barren, but in this house of ashes and dust, she had found a man who saw her worth beyond what she could give. As weeks passed, the ranch began to bloom again, the fields greener, the horses stronger, laughter echoing through open windows. Clara planted wildflowers by the porch and watched them take root, just as she had. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset, John said quietly, "You ever think maybe some people were meant to build something different, not bloodlines, but peace?" She smiled, her hand finding his. "Maybe that's our kind of family." The sky blazed crimson and gold as he kissed her forehead. "Then let's keep it that way." And as the stars rose over the ranch, their light fell on two hearts that had been sold, broken, and healed, not by destiny, but by choice. Clara knew now that love didn't need children to be whole. It needed courage, faith, and the willingness to stay when the world told you to leave. Her story had begun as a transaction, but it became a promise of redemption written across the Texas sky. Months passed, and the ranch flourished like never before. Clara's laughter filled the air, and John's weary heart found its rhythm again. But one morning, a letter arrived, a cruel reminder of her past. Her father had died in debt, her mother begging her to return and save the family home. Tears welled in Clara's eyes. "I owe them," she whispered. John took her trembling hands. "You owe them nothing, Clara. You've already paid with your heart." Still, she left, believing she must. Weeks later, as storms swept across the plains, a familiar wagon rolled back through the gates. Clara stepped down, rain streaking her face. "I realized," she said, breathless, "home isn't where you're born. It's where someone waits for you." John's eyes softened as he drew her close. "And I've been waiting every sunrise." They kissed beneath the thunder, their pain washed clean by the rain. That night, a light glowed in the ranch window again, steady, warm, eternal. Love had not only survived, it had conquered. Dizzy, if this story touched your heart, subscribe for more tales of love, hope, and second chances, because sometimes, the broken ones build the strongest homes. Red Heart.